Well, I've been on a little series that I've just called I guess it's called The Series. 'Cause my first two messages were called The Hated. I encourage you to check that out. Then my one after that was called The Loved. Not only are we sometimes hated as believers, whether rightly or wrongly, mostly wrongly, but sometimes I think we deserve some of the flack that we catch. But we're also loved. If the world hates us, we know God loves us, and there's nothing that can separate us ever from his love. Then last time together, we looked at the victors, because I thought I wanted to just encourage you and challenge you. I made a few joking references to Bruin fans with the 8 clap, UCLA, fight, fight, fight. Trojan fans with fight on, fight on, da-da-da-da, the white horse. Well, Christians, sometimes we go through things in life and we just need to be cheered on. We need to be encouraged. I love how Hebrews says that we should keep pressing on because we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. And it's actually talking about all those who've died in the Lord. Now, I don't want to open up the can of worms as to whether or not our relatives who are in heaven, having preceded us in death, are literally looking down upon us or not. But Hebrews sort of paints at least a symbolic picture of, these heroes looking down on us like they're the spectators and we're on the field of play in life trying to get this thing done. Church history used to call the church 2 different ways. It was called the church militant, those of us that were still on this planet fighting the good fight, and the church triumphant, those who were already passed away and they went on to be with the Lord, almost like they're in the stands, we're on the field playing the game, and come on, man, we got to keep going. Sometimes I really do think like that. You may think I'm crazy, because ultimately my final motivation by far is my love for God. But sometimes I can almost kind of picture my daddy, whether he literally is or not, I don't know. I can picture him up there looking down and saying, come on, Jim, don't quit. Keep on keeping on. We are the victors, and I want to encourage you on that. Psalm 27 will be my victory chant for today. Let me start by just reading verse number 1, where David declares. Last time we looked, it was a psalm of the sons of Korah. This is a psalm of David. The Lord is my light, Psalm 27:1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? I love the fact that David starts with the declarative. He just declares what's true. The Lord's my light and my salvation. The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Then he gets to the interrogative. He asks the question, whom shall I fear? Of whom shall I be afraid? This is an early form of one of my favorite TV shows that my family teases me without mercy about. Jeopardy! You guys ever watch Jeopardy? You remember that? They put the answer on the screen and you've got to word your response in the form of a question. Hey, David, the original Jeopardy. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Then you buzz in, yes? Whom shall I fear? Okay, the next one on Jeopardy. The Lord is the stronghold of my life. I know that. Buzz in again. Of whom shall I be afraid? I'd like to because I'm going to read the whole psalm before we're done today, but that first psalm, let me read it to you again. The Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? I want to give this to you today, almost like a pharmacist giving you a prescription or a professor giving you homework. Why don't you memorize, meditate upon, think about Psalm 27, verse 1. There used to be the old stereotype joke that you're having issues in the night, but because it's the middle of the night, your doctor doesn't want to, come see you. So when you call them up, maybe get in touch with them, the old joke is, take 2 aspirins and call me in the morning. Take 2 aspirins, call me in the morning. I want to have you take one Bible verse, don't have to call me, but take Psalm 27, verse 1. It'll do you a world of good. And it helps us, it just helps us to recover a proper perspective. Let me say that again. This helps us to recover a proper perspective. We can so easily get out of alignment that sometimes we just need to sort of get ourselves back in alignment with the will of God. In fact, in the Lord's Prayer, one of the main lines in the Lord's Prayer is, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Then here it is, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth just like it is in heaven. If I can get my life in alignment with what's going on in heaven, then things start to change here on earth. I think it's very irritating when my car gets out of alignment. Maybe it's just me, but when I drive a car, I like to be able to let go of the steering wheel and the car doesn't veer off to the right, which cars can typically do, and occasionally they can start to veer off to the left. So literally, in a lot of cars, when you're driving straight, it's no big deal actually, but you know what I'm talking. There's just that tension. You have to kind of hold the car to just go straight. I want my car in alignment. I want my car, I'm going to be able to let go of it and the car to go straight. And by the way, for all of you mechanics, and they're going to tell me when I take my car in to get aligned, I get it that a lot of streets are a little bit slanted like that for the sake of water getting off the street. So I get it that it's going to a little bit veer that way. But still, come on, you know what I'm talking about. It irritates me. Sometimes life gets irritating when we're not in alignment with the will of God. We have to remember what David said, the Lord's my light and my salvation. Oh, that's right. I need to get my life back in proper alignment. Sometimes being out of alignment is more than irritating. I was laughing because the other day, getting ready for this message, I was on my keyboard typing out some thoughts, and most time I look down quite a bit, I'm making sure that it's right. But this time I was typing away, and I know how to type, but I had gone a little time without looking down, and I looked up, and on the screen, I bet this happened to you, just gibberish, nonsense. My hand was only one key off. Now I know the keyboards have those little bumps and stuff. They're supposed to help you without looking, know where your fingers are, but still, I had gotten off track just by one key. Being off track just by one key had caused everything else I typed to be nonsense. Sometimes in my life, I'm just barely off. I don't even realize I'm off. And I'm moving ahead, but then all of a sudden I wonder, why is all this nonsense and stuff happening in my life? Life's tough enough without me having to add to the pile of my issues that are simply the result of whatever you want to call it, my own stupidity or the consequences of my own stupid choices, whatever you want to call it. So, and the pressures of life can start to push us out of alignment. And if we don't, if we don't get our lives back into alignment, I'm talking about issues like this, lest I forget, key issues, like Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God. I sometimes have to take a step back. Am I really seeking God first in my life right now? Or have I kind of no, I didn't decide not to follow God. I still love God. If I die, I know I'm going to heaven. But I've just gotten so involved that pretty soon I'm not seeking God first. So I'm talking about basic issues like this. David, the Lord's my light. Why am I afraid right now? When I have to get back in alignment. If we don't do that, then we can start to just treat symptoms of what we think is wrong and not get to the real source of the pain. I'm sure you know that if you just treat symptoms only, all you're going to do is settle down the symptoms for a while and they're going to come back. It can even happen where different symptoms can start to happen from the same root cause. If you want to look at how we live our lives, some people can go from one unhealthy addiction to another unhealthy addiction, then to another unhealthy addiction, sometimes dropping their earlier unhealthy addictions, but they're still all messed up because it's all coming from the same stuff. They haven't dealt with those root issues yet. Yeah, I know we can mask it. We can take drugs. We can go get high on legal grass or illegal drugs or whatever it might be, and you can mask the pain, but your life is still out of alignment. When you're on drugs, you don't notice it. You're driving along, oh, that's nice. But your life is still veering off. It's veering off. Your hands are just a little bit off, maybe way off on the keyboards, and you're giving it your best shot. But it's just nonsense. How did David do it? Well, if you kept your Bibles open and if you kept your apps unlocked, you can read you what David goes on to say, because Psalm 27 verse 1 is basically the thesis statement, and all the rest of the psalm explains verse 1. The thesis again, I'll just read verse 1 again, then I'll read the whole thing. Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Then David goes on to say, when the wicked advance against me to devour me, it's my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fail. When my haters and my detractors are out to just get me, you know what? If I hang in there with God, eventually they're going to be the ones that are going to have to face the music. Verse 3, though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. Oh, I like that. Verse 4, one thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. For in, oh, I love this verse, Psalm 20. I said to memorize verse 1, but here's another good one, verse 5. For in the day of trouble, he will keep me safe in his dwelling. He will hide me in the shelter of his sacred tent and set me high upon a rock. Can't get to me now. No. That's kind of the image David's using here. Verse 6, then my head will be exalted above the enemies who surround me. At his sacred tent, I will sacrifice with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. Hear my voice when I call, Lord. Be merciful to me and answer me. My heart says of you, seek his face, your face, Lord, I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger, for you have been my helper. Do not reject me or forsake me, God, my Savior. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Teach me your way, Lord. Lead me in a straight path because of my oppressors. Do not turn me over. By the way, look at that. Teach me your way, O Lord. Lead me in a straight path because of my oppressors. Because when people start to hit it, it is so hard not to lower ourselves to their level and fight how they fight. I used to kind of think that being a Christian is unfair because our enemies, in fact, as far as that goes, even the enemy of our souls, they can use whatever tactics they want to use to attack us. And here I am, I got to fight right. I got to fight the way God wants you to fight. I would compare it to, can you imagine if a boxer had to get in the ring and had to use boxing rules, wear certain gloves, can't hit below the belt, but had to fight someone who basically, I don't know if it's a W, I don't know what all these initials are, but they could bite you, throw you around, throw you out of the ring, and yet you got to stick with your boxing rules. I feel like that in life sometimes. Hear me, I can't lie like they're lying. I want to lie because they're lying about me. I'm going to get them, and they smack me, I'm going to smack them twice. And he says, no, God, David's saying, God, keep me on the straight path because my oppressors are tempting me. Don't want to cuss them out like they just cussed me out. Do not turn me over to the desire of my foes, for false witnesses will rise up against me. Everything they're saying about me online ain't right. Spouting malicious accusations. Then the last two verses. I remain confident of this. Come on now, let's cheer. This is Trojan fans, this is the dun 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 dun. UCLA fans, it is the 8 clap. U dump bump C. UCLA, fight. David says for us believers, I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Not just after I die, not just pie in the sky by and by when I die. I believe I'm going to see the goodness of God right now before I die. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and take heart. Where did this confidence come from? It can almost come across as an arrogance. It's not, but it can almost come across like that. Where did David get this kind of confidence? Well, from the psalm, we can notice, what I have now, 3 things. Number 1, we can notice from David, and we ought to do the same thing. We can notice David's triumphs, his triumphs. We tend by nature, and if you have my personality, you even tend to do this even more. By that, I mean Marguerite by nature's an optimist. That's why God put us together, because he knew I'm a pessimist. I prefer the idea of realist, but some will say I'm a pessimist. But all of us tend to do this, especially if you're more realistic / pessimistic. We tend by nature to focus so much on our troubles and our tragedies and our trials that we neglect our triumphs. David was good in the book of Psalms. If you ever read the book of Psalms, David is good at reminding God, which is really reminding himself, because he's not giving God any unknown information. David was good in the book of Psalms about reminding himself that not every day is a bad day. In fact, let me look at you right now. Some of y'all need to kind of bust out of it, get out of that pity party, and have to remember, you know what? Not every day is a bad day. My life hasn't been all doom and gloom. Sometimes we need to pause. That word Selah is used a lot in the book of Psalms. We just need to pause and marinate and think about, man, God's done some great things in my life. Sometimes you just ought to stop. God, man, for every mountain you've brought me over, every valley that you've seen me through, every blessing. Hallelujah, Lord, thank you for that blessing. For this, I will give you praise. Now, there's a reason for doing this, because contemplating, meditating upon, and reflecting upon our past triumphs can give us strength and courage and renewed faith to face the stuff we're going through today. I would think that some of y'all right now that are just going crazy because you're facing a big issue right now. And yet, if you look over your life, in the past, you've already overcome bigger Goliaths than you're facing right now. Doesn't necessarily make this any easier, except that it just gives you a little bit more courage and strength to get up and go at it again, trusting that God's going to see you through this one as well. I like this idea, because we used to sing a hymn in church, count your blessings, name them one by one, something like that, and count your blessings, see what God has done. Well, some of you ought to take it up a notch. Not only count your blessings, make your blessings count. Make your blessings count. In fact, since I'm on that, I believe Sundays is kind of good just to think about and use our imagination, because blessings are things that God has provided for us. But if you can use your imagination, there are some times, and we won't know maybe till heaven, all the things God has prevented. Let me say that again. Blessings come not only in the way that God has provided for us, blessings also come in the ways that God has prevented stuff from happening. I'm looking at someone right now, and you know that while some of your friends during your drug days didn't make it out, they died. They didn't make it, man. In this day and age, it can be very dangerous with the fentanyl thing. You can be taking drugs you don't think even have fentanyl. Boom, all of a sudden, I just tried it once, and now you're dead. Some of you look back, you have to go, wow, it's amazing I'm not dead. That's a blessing. Think about the ones we don't know about. Maybe there's been green lights that we just went through. And what we didn't know, and maybe never will know till heaven, is that God was watching over our lives, and a car was going to come and run through that red light, and for whatever reason, it got stopped. People just say, yeah, those are my guardian angels. In fact, I remember a time in a class, hearing people in the class, a Sunday school class, argue about, well, God has angels protecting us, but if you go over the speed limit, does God still honor that? So they were actually discussing, whatever it is, the speed limit's 65, does the angel jump off your hood when it gets to be 66 miles per hour? I don't know, but I do know this, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that my blessings from God are not only what he's provided, it is what he has prevented. David had this kind of confidence because he was able to focus on the triumphs that God had brought him in his life. Not only David's triumphs, David's trust. No matter what the trauma, the terror, or the trial, David knew that God is still able. And I would say to you that faith that is not tested really can't be trusted anyway. I would never, nor would you, go to a doctor who's never been tested, who didn't go to medical school. Of course, they couldn't become a doctor. I know, but you know what I'm saying. Law enforcement officials who've never been tested. And so those tests lead us to be able to be trusted, because you can't really trust what hasn't been tested. David had that kind of perspective. And don't forget that perspective is how we see things, is this perspective we see things from. And of course, there's always these issues. I have to be able to understand that your perspective may be a different perspective. I'm looking at you this way right now. You're looking at me from the other way. That's the difference of perspective. Democrats And Republicans not only have differences, they have different perspectives. They can be looking at the same problem, but they're looking at them from different angles, and therefore they can come up with very different analysis, very different suggested solutions because of their perspective. That's perspective. Now, perception is in how we perceive what we're seeing. So I can have the same perspective as someone else. We're looking at things from the same angle, if you will, but how we receive those, how we interpret what we see can be radically different. So perspective highly makes a difference on what our perception is, and perception can determine the outcome. A great predictor of outcome is our perception. Let me say that again. A great predictor of outcome is our perception. And of course, before that, our perspective. Now, I know I don't go overboard on this, but there is power in positive thinking. What was it called years ago? I think PMA, I think they called it, positive mental attitude. People are talking about PMA, positive mental attitude. The great Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, years ago back, what was that, the 50s and 60s? Pastor wrote the great books on the power of positive thinking. And of course, Christians would criticize him for being shallow and superficial. I remember preachers saying the power of Paul, the Apostle Paul, the power of Paul is appealing, and the gospel of Peale is appalling. Because it's weak. Dr. Robert Schuller caught some of the same flack. Joel Osteen today catches some of that same flack for being a little bit of more of a positive out. But still, in looking at all that, it does make a huge difference how you perceive life. James, for example, has this to say about our perspective and our perception when he talks about the trials and the tests that we're going through. Very similar to what David does in Psalm 46, but in a different way. James says in chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, he says, consider it, some of the older versions would say, reckon it, count it, regard it, consider it pure joy. Woo-hoo, what, my brothers and sisters? Whenever you face trials of many kinds. What? You want me to be happy when I'm going through my stuff? Why? Because you know that the testing of your faith produces, because it produces something, it produces perseverance. Then let perseverance or patience finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. The word Paul uses here for consider or count or reckon, to consider it, is the same word financial people of his day would use when they're counting up numbers. If you were to look at your net worth right now, your net worth is basically counting. What are your assets? Do you own anything? Do you have a house? Do you own a car, clothes, which, a lot of, whatever, I guess, I don't know if clothes are much of an asset because they fall in value so quickly. But you know what I'm talking about. Those are our assets. It's like a balance sheet for a business or a balance sheet for someone's personal finances. Then you have your liabilities. Oh, yeah, I own a house. The house is worth, $500,000. But what do you owe on it? I only owe $300,000. Well, that's good because you got about, it's worth $500, you owe $300, so you have a net positive balance of $200,000. Sometimes people can get what they call underwater. That happened during the housing crisis of, quite a few years ago, where actually what people would owe on a house was more than what the house was worth because the value of the house had dropped so far. And when you count, James here rather, in the book of James is saying, count. He said, so when you hit things that look like it's a liability, I mean, come on, man, trials and tests and temptations, that looks like a liability. It feels like a liability, but James says, well, count it as part of your net worth, because even though it kind of is a liability, if you have the proper perspective and the proper perception, it's what will eventually increase your assets. It will make you worth more. It will cause the value of your house, or if you will, the house that is your life, to go up in value. You see, you can't really get stronger in certain areas until you know where you're weak anyway. Where are those liabilities? If you go to the gym, one of the best things you can do, along with working out just your regular muscles that need normal maintenance and gaining of strength, it's sometimes good to look at Well, where am I especially not strong? I've had to do that the last few years with my core. I'm 70 years old right now, and I love to golf. So I've gone to all kinds of stuff to figure out what can help me stay flexible enough and strong enough and healthy enough to be able to stay on the golf course for as long as I can, because it's one of the things. It's if you know what I mean by this, it's my drug. It's the thing I do to kind of relax and keep on going. You can't get stronger without your weaknesses being exposed. Again, James, count it joy. Now, it's not fun to find out, which I did. I have a very weak core. That wasn't fun. In fact, the exercises, the planking, the yoga kind of stuff, the stretching, it's not all fun, but it's good. I have to count it joy because it accomplishes something. Whenever you see someone with a patch over their eye, I used to always assume something was wrong with that eye. Maybe they were missing an eye, like a pirate. I found out that eventually, sometimes to treat certain things like lazy eye, patches are put over not the bad eye, they're put over the strong eye. Because what they want to do is they want to make the weak eye stronger. So they cover up the dominant eye. I wonder I'm right eye dominant. If you took a little triangle and kept both eyes open and you picked a spot to look at, like right now I'm trying to look through my things at you, I have both my eyes open. If I close one eye and it stays generally the same, my perspective stays the same, that's my dominant eye. Like if I close my left eye, it looks the same because I am right eye dominant. If I close my right eye, it gets off kilter because only my left eye is open, and my left eye is my supportive eye. I don't know if they call it that. It's not my dominant eye. You could do the same thing. Now watch. As we go through life, I wonder what our dominant eye is. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, we walk by faith and not by sight. So let me kind of make up something right now. Your natural eye and your faith eye. Which one is dominant? I would suggest that for most of us, our natural eye is what's dominant. So sometimes, I like this, it's not too bad of an idea to sort of patch over your natural dominant eye for a while to begin to train your weaker eye, which may be the eye of faith, so that they can both start to work better together. In fact, on the medical side, here's what they say about medically covering up a dominant eye. They say, if you cover up the dominant eye, it forces in fact, I'll read it to you. This will train the brain to use the other eye, not the dominant one, and strengthen it. This treatment does not weaken the dominant eye, but instead helps the brain pick up both signals so that both eyes can work better together. I am preaching it right now. Sometimes we need to learn, like James says, count it all regard, because with your natural eye, it doesn't look like joy. Why do we have to count it as joy anyway? Hebrews chapter 12:11 says, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Trials and discipline, and they never seem they never seem good at the time, but get this, trials and tests do not produce joy. That's why we have to count it as joy. They don't produce joy. What they produce is fruit. I repeat, trials, discipline, temptations, tragedies, they don't produce joy in and of themselves, and that's never what the Bible or James says. It says to count it as joy, regard it as joy. Why? Because it does produce fruit. In the passage in James, it says it produces, for example, patience and endurance and perseverance. So until you have it, act like it. That's what to count as joy. Act like it's joy. Pretend like you enjoy those duties like washing the dishes and so forth. And again, I know there's a little bit of an element of people saying, well, I don't want to be fake and phony and be a hypocrite. There's a difference between being a hypocrite and acting in faith, sort of covering up your dominant natural flesh eye and walking with your faith eye for a while until that faith actually becomes reality. And then when you finally take the patch off, you see better together. David had confidence because of his triumphs. David had confidence because of his trust. And I'm out of time, but that's the last one. David, had confidence because of time. He spent time with God in worship, and not just worship, he spent time with God in warfare. I like that. David spent time in worship. Remember the psalm said, one thing I desire, I want to be with you all the time, God. I want to hang in your temple. But David knew he couldn't. He had to get out there and fight sometimes, just like we do. Remember, when Moses was up on the mountaintop in the valley of Rephidim and Joshua's down there in the valley fighting the battle, as long as Moses kept his hands up and prayed, they won on the battle. And if Moses got tired and dropped his hands, they began to lose, symbolizing lack of prayer. That's why I like to tell people all the time. So Moses had intercessors come, hold his hands up, and Moses prayed on the mountaintop, and Joshua fought to victory in the valley of Rephidim. It's not an either or, it's a both and. You can't just simply pray like Moses. You also have to fight like Joshua. And it's not enough to fight like Joshua and not pray. You got to pray like Moses. Some of the secular people drive me up the wall when Christians post on social media when a tragedy happens, praying for New York or, praying for Austin, they actually will use the F word, blank you in your prayers. It's not, listen, I get it because they think all we do is pray. Listen, we can and should do other things than pray, but nothing without prayer. Well, I'm kind of quickly run out of time. I got more to say and no time to say it. But I do want to encourage you today. I want to be that cheerleader. You are a victor. David had confidence. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my stronghold. He's the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Come on, man. Let's be those victors. At the very end of the psalm in verse 13, David said, man, I would have lost heart had I not kept believing. Look at me. I know some of you are going through some rough times. David knows what that's like. He says, I would have lost heart, but I kept on believing anyway. Jeremiah at one point gets so upset with the Lord and so upset with the response of the people to his messages. He says, I'm out of here. I quit. But then Jeremiah notes in chapter 20, but there was this fire in my belly and I just couldn't stop. Someone looking at me right now, I know you want to quit. You want to throw in the towel, but something keeps you from doing it. You've messed up, you've blown it, and you want to quit, give up. Everyone else is giving up on you. You might as well give up on yourself. But something's kept you from doing it. You're like Jeremiah. There's this fire in your belly. You can't quit because you know God is real. The psalmist in Psalm 23 says, I almost slipped when I saw the prosperity of the wicked, and I almost lost my faith when I saw how much those worldly people are out there having a great time, apparently, on spring break. And then they were sending a storm up, and they're having more fun. I almost slipped. But I had this fire in my belly where I just couldn't give up. The psalm closes by telling us to wait on the Lord. David's like, you know what? I know we get tempted. Let's just wait upon the Lord. He may not come when you want him, but I promise you this, you'll want him when he comes, and he is coming for sure. I'm going to say that again. He may not always come when we want him to, but I promise you, we will want him when he decides to show up in that kind of victory.